Toria. I'm glad that we stand together today in response to some of the worst days that we have seen in our society recently. And I think it's important that we stand together to send a very strong message that we are united together against hatred, that we are united against racism and Islamophobia, and that we send the message that love and hope will prevail over hate. And that we send a message to the racist thugs who have been attempting to destroy parts of our community over recent days and weeks, that we will not tolerate it, that what you're doing is wrong and that you must stop. It's racist, it's sectarian, it's Islamophobic, and it does not represent the people that we represent here. If we are to take society forward and build a better future for everybody, we must do that. And we must condemn what we've seen. To our ethnic minority communities, I want us to say today that we support you, that we stand with you, that we defend your right to a life free from intimidation and discrimination, that we see your fear and we send solidarity to you, that we value you, that we see the part you play in our society and that you are a part of our society, and we want that to stay that way. You make our society a better place, and you are a part of us. Those who incited this violence will not win, and those who have been responsible for criminal behaviour in recent days must be held to account by the PSNA and by our justice system. And there is an onus on us all as leaders in our communities and as elected representatives to stand together and call this out, because discrimination has no place in our society, and no one is born with hate in their hearts. It only exists and grows through ignorance and fear and allowing misinformation to win. And when those who know better do not challenge it and do not call it out, then you become compliant in allowing a narrative that is wrong to win out. So we have a responsibility as leaders in our areas to stand together against that and to call it out. And we must send the message today that we are opposed to this and that hope will win out over hate.
Paula Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support today's motion to tell people from all ethnic minority communities now living in Northern Ireland that they are valued, that this is their home as much as anyone else's, and that we will endorse and support the rebuilding that now has to be done. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, that rebuilding goes well beyond the clear-up of destroyed properties and even beyond the restoration of vital businesses. It requires action from political leaders, and it requires the rebuilding of trust. There are people who have chosen to make Northern Ireland their home and who have chosen to contribute to this society who now feel hurt, fearful and isolated. They need reassurance that what we are here today is to provide them with that support regardless of religion, ethnicity or community background. And I would support Steve Aiken's contribution there around including anti-Semitism. Hate is hate. Mr. Speaker, I would like to quickly get up to the substantive parts of the motion. In the Racial Equality Strategy 2015-2025, there was a commitment to review the Race Relations Order, which is now 27 years old and entirely out of date. The consultation on the draft order concluded in June 2023, 14 months ago, and yet the official line from the Executive Office is that the report on the responses and feedback is currently under review, and that there is an aim to bring forward updated race relations legislation in 2025-26. Given that its purpose is to provide the best possible legal protections against racism and towards a more equal society, and that it will include provisions for advancing long-awaited ethnic equality monitoring, I would like to hear from the First Minister today if there is any way that this can be brought forward sooner as per the motion. Turning now to the Racial Equality Strategy itself, it is needed to address issues which remain sadly current and even more urgent, such as tackling race hate crime, racist bullying in our schools and ensuring fair employment. The current version was drafted a decade ago, and that makes it rather outdated given how much things have changed in that time period. sadly, many for the worse. Mr Speaker, I'd like to hear from the First Minister in outlining what work is being taken within her department to ensure a seamless transition between the current strategy and the next one, and also hear a commitment that this will be developed with the community and voluntary sector, be far-reaching and adequately funded for maximum impact. Turning now to the refugee integration strategy, it is almost 20 years since OFM-DFM first committed to this. Under its current iteration, it was consulted upon in late 2021, early 22, and was meant to run from 2022 to 2027. But due to the political impasse, this has been significantly delayed, and it was the understanding of the Committee for the Executive Office that this should have been signed off in May 24. However, the official position from TEO remains that the revised draft strategy and associated thematic delivery plans will be brought before the Executive, and I quote, in due course. So I would like to hear a firm date from the First Minister today. Mr Speaker, as I said in my opening remarks, we now need to see a period of rebuilding. And as we see this begin, we must reflect today on the vital work of a sector which has for far too long been undervalued. When destruction of this nature arises, we see community groups and voluntary organisations prominent in their response. They offer immediate assistance with clean-ups, they offer support and advice for those impacted, and they continue to act as a consistent voice against racism and division. I would particularly pay tribute to the Belfast Islamic Centre, the Northern Ireland Muslim Family Association, and the many other ethnic minority groups operating in South Belfast for their tireless efforts this last week in supporting people impacted by the attacks. Mr Speaker, at least 3 PSNI officers have been injured in the line of duty in this last week. We must never normalise this, and I give thanks for their service, especially those on the front line in South Belfast this last week as well. In closing, Mr Speaker, this is a moment for cohesion in this chamber and for us to speak with a common voice. We all recognise that there's a lot of work to be getting on with, and in reassuring every member of our community that they are valued and that their interests will be protected and promoted on an equal basis. Mr Speaker, what we are saying in this chamber today is that if you attack one member of our community, regardless of creed or colour, you attack all members of our community. And it is on that basis that we start rebuilding. Thank you.
Ms Kimmins.
Corda, and today is an important opportunity for us all to stand together and condemn the horrendous images and attacks we have seen on our migrant communities over the last number of days. And we have to show leadership and ensure that they know that we stand with them, and we will do everything we can to protect them going forward. I stand here not just as Sinn Féin Health spokesperson, but as a citizen who sees every single day just how much those people who have come from other countries enrich our society and contribute to our society in so many ways. There are thousands of hard-working international doctors, nurses, surgeons, midwives and many other healthcare professions within our health service who have dedicated and continue to dedicate their lives to our health and well-being. These people have left their home countries, they have left their families, and they have left their communities to come here where they are saving lives and providing invaluable care to patients from all backgrounds, bar none. Just 18 months ago, general medicine in my local hospital, Daisy Hill, was at the brink of collapse due to crippling staff shortages. But thankfully, due to the choices made by many overseas workers, healthcare professionals who'd made the choice to come to Ireland and work in our health service, those services have been stabilised and protected, and we must be and are eternally grateful to each and every one of them. The very least people from minority ethnic communities deserve is respect and to have safety and security the same as any other individual across this island. Ireland is the land of Céad Míle Fáilte, and our communities have embraced and welcomed many people from other communities over the years, as many of our people have been welcomed when they have immigrated to countries right across this world. Just yesterday I spoke to some of our international healthcare workers in the Southern Trust area who described the fear they are feeling as they watch on the disgraceful and despicable scenes that we have seen over recent days. They are afraid to go to work, they are afraid to come home, and they're afraid to take their children out in public. Well, I say to you, we stand with you, we value you, and we have the utmost respect for the huge contribution you make to our society every day. This is your home, and you are all welcome here. Racism and hatred is never acceptable. No ifs, no buts, and most importantly, no excuses.
Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it had not been my intention to speak in this debate today, as all that needs to be said has been said eloquently and sincerely by all the previous contributors. I hope that those who feel threatened or just frightened by the disgraceful events of recent days can take some comfort from the support expressed in this chamber and indeed within the broader community. Some months ago, Mr. Speaker, I was a reluctant but very grateful guest in the wards of the Ulster Hospital. Injections, drips and regular medication were the main features of my 2-week stay. At least 25% of the medical and nursing staff who administered this treatment 24/7 were from overseas. I am saddened but can fully understand why some of these medical practitioners have expressed the view that they intend to take their skills elsewhere. I would appeal to all the overseas staff and our health and social care system not to leave. The community of which you and your families are valued members need you. You are outsiders, totally and completely one of us. Thank you.
McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by saying that it's important that we are here today and that my party was very glad to support the recall of this place. It's hard to find the words to describe what we've seen in the last week unfold in the capital city and elsewhere. The scenes of racist attacks, wanton destruction, outright hatred have been appalling, disturbing and plainly wrong. Last weekend we saw nothing short of an explosion of hate on our streets, and it has shaken all of us. I hope that today is an opportunity for loud and unequivocal condemnation of that hate, and from every single politician and from every single party. That's the job of political leadership, and I hope that we meet it today collectively. Over the last week, far-right agitators have sought to cruelly and criminally exploit people, often our teenagers, for their own racist ends. Those agitators have shown the worst of our society. They have shown the dark underbelly of racist and fascist attitudes that still exist. They made me embarrassed and ashamed, not that just these elements still exist, but also the fact that this is 2024. We still have a society where these kind of attitudes are allowed to fester and actually grow, where too many people still point to desperate people coming across on boats and dignities as the enemy. I know that the vast majority of us know that it is inequality, not immigration, that is the real enemy. And I was proud to stand in the Guildhall Square last night, a packed Guildhall Square, and listen to our mayor, our first citizen, giving a powerful, passionate speech against right-wing agitators. It was a message of hope, and it was powerfully delivered by our first black mayor. That gave me hope, because that's who we are. That's who Northern Ireland is, and we heard it loud and clear at those demonstrations. And that the barriers to housing or employment are not because of migrants or refugees, of whom, by the way, we take a staggeringly low share, but it is because of policy failure. Housing rights has been clear that the housing crisis particularly is not about migration, but by the devastatingly low levels of social housing that has been built. We need to get back to the facts in this public debate, and it is the job of all of us in this chamber to educate and inform, never to demonise. Speaker, in the face of this violence, Many people are rightly asking themselves, what kind of society are we building for the next generation? I think it is also important today to say that it cannot be the one where this kind of behaviour is allowed to proceed or go unpunished or attitudes unchanged. And nor can it be one where we appeal to criminal gangs to use their influence to bring down tempers or to quell racist incidents. Some of the language that we have heard over the last week, as well as some of the silence that has taken place, has been misguided and has been sinister. In short, Speaker, it is my firm view that the people of Northern Ireland deserve so much better than this, and that the people of Northern Ireland are better than this. But unfortunately, I also know that as shocked as many were by the recent events in recent days, there are others, particularly from our minority communities, who will be less shocked. Less shocked because they have seen this pervasive and perverse hate before. They see it in their daily lives. And less shocked because they know the views that fuel the hate have for many years now been given credence and credibility by governments, particularly across the water. Governments that are more interested in stunts than solutions. There is no doubt rhetoric in recent years is coming home to roost. And the failure of government here is contributing to that crisis as well.
Member, give way.
I will.
Yeah, thank you. Would the member agree with me as well that the stop-go nature of politics here has impacted the delivery of many of the strategies which we can draw a direct line to some of the problems that we're facing today, and that we need to see the executive delivering on strategies, not just announcing them?
Members, next minute.
Absolutely, I totally agree with the member. So, and Lo, I and many others welcome the recall of the Assembly as the right thing to happen. But I know we will also want to hear more than warm words. And today I want to hear from the First and Deputy First Minister. I want to see progress towards swift agreement to the refugee integration strategy, an update on the racial equality strategy. We also want to see, and will play our part in ensuring strong accountability too in Westminster on this issue, to ensure that the new government there lives up to its commitments and overhauls the asylum system in a fair, compassionate and just way. As a society and political leaders, we will of course all have a job of work to do to deal with the root causes of racism, Islamophobia and xenophobia. Everywhere where we find it, we need to call it out. I would like to hear the First Minister's responses on how they have engaged with the PSNI in relation to its response last weekend, and how it will deal with issues moving forward, particularly given the possibility of more protests this weekend.
Members, time's up.
Although we recognise the PSNI's service last weekend,
time is up.
Okay,
Thank
many,
you.
including Amnesty International, have said that our police have questions to answer and why they did not stop those racists from attacking communities and businesses in apparent impunity. Thank you.
I certainly didn't envisage this would be the way to break myself into an Assembly debate, but at times we need to pull up our socks, go onto our feet and lead from the front. I rise to strongly condemn the violence we have seen in recent days. To be clear from the offset, the destruction of property and physical attacks on people have no place in Northern Ireland and have never had. Those responsible need to be brought to justice, regardless of the label they do it under or the organisation they stem from. I have taken multiple calls across Northampton from businesses concerned at the potential risk to their employees and the effect on the business if workers decide to return home. Taking Wrightbus in my constituency as an example, they employ over 2,000 people, and due to a local lack of skilled workforce, they've had to bring in 600 skilled workers from the Philippines. These workers come to Northern Ireland to work, they contribute financially to the country and integrate amongst their local community and neighbours. They should be made to feel very welcome to be here in Northern Ireland. Right across Northern Ireland, multiple sectors depend on foreign workers, and I appeal to those who take to the streets to exercise their right to protest, do so with this in mind. Mr. Speaker, I've come to the conclusion that one of the main problems people, such as myself, have with condemning the violence in this place, with some of the ones condemning the violence in this place, is actually the structures that exist here. The First Minister has said there is no alternative to IRA campaign. Let me remind the House what that means. No alternative to the murder of Thomas Niedermayer, a German industrialist who brought employment to Belfast only to be abducted, murdered and buried face down in the dump by the Provisional IRA. A horrific case which ultimately resulted in a number of his family members taking their own lives. You cannot say out of one side of your mouth that violence of recent days directed at immigrants was wrong, whilst out of the other side of your mouth defend the murder of a migrant who brought jobs to West Belfast. All murder was and is wrong. All violence was and is wrong. The very fact that there's people sitting in this place who cannot say that is a huge problem. I hear from people regularly who see that violence has worked for others in Northern Ireland, and now they believe that that is the only way for others to sit up and take notice of the concerns they have. This is an argument I hear time and time again. I will never defend violence, but those in this House need to recognise and respect that people have a right to peacefully protest and express their concerns. Whether this House likes to hear it or not, there are legitimate concerns about legal and illegal immigration in Northern Ireland and throughout the rest of the United Kingdom. I welcome and refer to this statement from the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Ms Jones states the only way to stem the tide of violent disorder is to acknowledge what is causing it. She goes on to say the government must acknowledge what is causing the civil unrest in order to prevent it. Arresting people or creating violent disorder units is treating the symptom, not the cause. Honeyed words from this House, whilst ignoring the problems, won't make this issue go away. The people with legitimate concerns are fathers, their mothers, their grandparents, and it's simply wrong to brand them as far right, as many have tried to do. It is only right to acknowledge that tragic murders in Southport are the catalyst which sparked the current unrest, similar trouble to what we have seen in France and indeed in the Republic. Unchecked, unpoliced, illegal migration needs to be brought to an end. I have heard it repeatedly claimed that the number of people leaving Northern Ireland is greater than those coming here. Data published by the Northern Ireland Stats and Research Agency proves that claim is false. In fact, there was a net international flow of over 5,000 people in the year ending mid-2022. The reality is that many working class communities such as Harryville in my own constituency recognise the pressures on housing which immigration has played a factor in. Go ahead.
I thank the member for his intervention, and I wonder how you can put the housing crisis on migrants' feet when in fact it is politicians who are responsible for investment.
Members, next minute.
If the member had listened to say it played a factor, I didn't say it was solely the problem, but there are also greater pressures in my constituency. Seeing a doctor, seeing a dentist, something which, whether you like to admit it or not, that immigration has played a part in. There are pressures in schools. Immigration has been a factor, mainly due to a language barrier. Yes, years of underinvestment from this place within the departments have played a part in that. But burying your heads in the sand won't make this issue go away. My goodness, to all those rigorous implementers that we have in this House, who cheer every time that the protocol separates us further from the rest of the United Kingdom, including on immigration policy, they also have to take some responsibility for the mess we have found ourselves in. Moving forward, it's highly likely that Northern Ireland may face greater challenges ahead than the rest of the UK government, as that government looks to grapple with the issue in Westminster, while we in Northern Ireland are excluded
Time is up.
from such measures as a result of the protocol.
Well,
Put on record my disgust at the brutal racist violence we have witnessed in recent days. I also want to extend solidarity to all the victims, to state that the far right forces behind these attacks are in the minority, and to say that there are countless people here who are determined to stamp out racism, Islamophobia and bigotry of any kind. The scenes we've seen in recent days have been abhorrent. Certainly the experience of the weekend was that things could have been a lot worse if we did not have an organised anti-racist response to those who wanted to divide us. When a small far-right mob gathered at City Hall on Saturday, they were met with thousands of anti-racist campaigners, and I want to pay credit to every single campaigner who took a stand and is taking a stand against the hate of the far right. However, what we saw on Saturday was a group of violent thugs being given virtually free rein after the protest to attack migrants and migrant-owned businesses, and the PSNI have serious questions to answer on that front. The violence witnessed in recent days, Mr. Speaker, did not occur in a vacuum. The far right have been emboldened by the racism of those in power and who want to scapegoat migrants for their own failings. These are governments who have failed to build social homes, and some should listen to that point, have cut public services, kept wages down and punished working class people through brutal economic measures like the 2-child limit. Migrants, refugees or asylum seekers are not to blame. Deprivation wrought by successive Westminster and Stormont administrations is fertile ground for racist ideas to grow and fester. However, racism does not stem from working class communities. It is a top-down ideology that is created and fuelled by government policy. The Tories, who spent years attacking our communities, told us that people fleeing for their lives in small boats were the problem. They wanted us to focus on people who had nothing, whilst turning a blind eye to the wealthy who are hoarding ever-increasing amounts of obscene wealth. They caricatured migrants, asylum seekers and refugees and tried to strip them of their human rights with a disgraceful Rwanda bill. And Labour, Mr. Speaker, have continued with the Tories' hostile environment policy, which does condemn asylum seekers fleeing war, poverty and persecution to a life of misery here. And the measures designed to degrade and punish them for coming here happen here on this executive's watch, which is tied to the hostile environment policy by a million threads. We see detention and deportation facilities like Lauren House operating under Stormont's nose. We have the executive's failure to bring forward a racial equality strategy, and then people in this House wonder if we have a racism problem. Political choices which either ignore or pander to racism have led us to where we are today, and even now, after all the racist violence, there are elected representatives who still continue to give succour to far-right thugs who have loyalist paramilitaries in their ranks. They say these people have legitimate concerns. Let me say, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing legitimate about racism, Islamophobia and hate of those who have coordinated and organised these attacks. It is a great irony, Mr. Speaker, that those who excuse racism and talk about so-called legitimate concerns are the same who have overseen the housing crisis, the crisis in our NHS and much, much, much else. However, it would make an absolute mockery of us all if we were to listen to politicians who do refuse to build public homes, refuse to tackle sky-high rents and who do the bidding of landlords at every single turn. Migrants are not the problem. We have a problem with landlords, a problem with underfunding and a problem with a government that refuses to tackle the housing crisis. And working class unity, Mr. Speaker, working class unity is key to delivering on housing, overcoming poverty and seeing investment in all of our public services. That's why we need to combine those struggles with the anti-racism struggle, because we are stronger together. We can only win together. And it will be up to us to stand up for one another, because the government and the police force have failed. I'll also offer a severe word of caution about the subsequent police response, Mr. Speaker. Young people who are incited to riot by loyalist paramilitaries do not need to be fired at with lethal plastic bullets, which should be banned. If the state wants to deal with rioting, they should deal with the paramilitary and far-right leaders who are orchestrating and organising this violence, but I won't hold my breath. So what we need, Mr. Speaker, is a mass anti-racism movement to reclaim our streets and isolate the far-right. We need working class people to unite against racism in their communities, in their workplaces and everywhere it raises its ugly head. Stand up against racism. Don't give it any quarter, any truck. Solidarity.
Claire Sugden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an important message that we come together as an Assembly to unequivocally condemn the behaviour and racist motivation that we are watching unfold in Belfast and across the United Kingdom. First, I wish to remember 3 beautiful girls, Baby, Elsie and Alice, whose precious lives were taken by a man, a young man. And if there is any protest that we should all join, it should be to address the persistent violence against women and girls. It is not all men, and indeed men and boys are victims too. But when violence does occur, facts tell us the perpetrator is usually a man. And this is the crisis that we need to address, and I would ask Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom to reflect on that, rather than the misinformation that is clouding judgment on this issue today. I also wish to pay tribute to the community in Southport. We need to look to their example, that despite profound loss and a deep wound that will scar their community forever, they have remembered their babies with dignity. They do not want violence, and they do not want it in the name of those they loved. So those who are rioting, being abusive, don't dare claim it is for anyone but yourself. To those being targeted, I am so sorry that living here has made you feel scared, intimidated and unsafe. I'm horrified. I'm ashamed, as someone who is deeply proud to be from Northern Ireland, that this behaviour is being associated with my home place, your home place. Immigrants, ethnic minorities are not a community apart. You are our community. You are the doctors in our hospitals, the businesses that have provided jobs, the colour and culture that have enriched our lives, and the people targeting can only claim to live here. Let us all be very clear. The motivation of riots, not protest, riots, criminal damage, intimidation is racism. Those leading it are racists. Their raison d'etre is to whitewash our community. So if you're telling me you're not a racist, then don't try to justify the behaviour. Stop the whataboutery and stop standing with them. The vast majority of people in Northern Ireland are wonderful, welcoming people. Let's not allow this behaviour to represent us. Share your concerns, protest peacefully, contact your MLA, but not in the way that we are seeing. And I do acknowledge there are problems, but these problems were created by successive governments, or lack of, both in Stormont and Westminster. What sense or justification is there to destroy a business that creates jobs, serves the community and contributes to our economy? If you are frustrated because you cannot find a house, cannot access your GP, cannot heat your home because the government is planning to take away your subsidy, then don't blame those who are in the same position as you, because they are. The colour of their skin doesn't stop the very real problems of bad government and poor public services. If anything, it exacerbates them. And what we are seeing should be a stark warning to both the Northern Ireland Executive and the UK Government. You need to build confidence back in the people of Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom. That starts with a programme for government action, resourcing our police force, building houses. Start listening to the people who elect us and start serving them accordingly. And it means nothing that the Union flag has joined with the Irish flag as a symbol of this behaviour. If anything, it justifies nothing and desecrates both. A criminal is a criminal, regardless of the flag they fly. Setting aside sectarianism for racism is not novel or something to be proud of. And paramilitaries don't exist for a cause or because they're concerned about you. It is entirely about them, whether to sell drugs, make money or other forms of criminality. Those things are much easier when the police are distracted elsewhere. It is your community they're exploiting, and it's your children they're manipulating. I'm horrified seeing children in the middle of all the current violence, but sadly it isn't you. But I will remind parents that the criminal age of responsibility in Northern Ireland is 10 years old. Their cute smile won't save them, their primary school uniform won't save them. They will be criminals for the rest of their lives. And is that what we really want for them? Is that what we want for the future of Northern Ireland? Mr. Speaker, I stand against racism.
Call the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, and you have 15 minutes.
And can I welcome the fact that the Assembly has convened today and that we are very strongly united and standing firmly against the racism, the violence and the intimidation that we have witnessed over the past few days. I welcome the fact that we have many members in the gallery here today and many people at home watching on, looking for that strong political leadership at this time of violence and intimidation. I very much welcome the tone, I think, that's been set here by and large by most people in terms of the contribution to the debate itself, because racism is a stain in our society. There is a no to racism and no place for it in our society, and there's no excuse
There's no rationale, there's no justification. Racism is wrong in every single form. So to those people, I want to speak directly to those people that are inciting hatred in our society today. We see you, we reject your attitudes and your actions. To those that are involved in violence and intimidation, in causing chaos and destruction, you will be dealt with by the full force of the law. To those that are targeting our minority communities, stop now, because you do not speak for us, and you will never speak for us. The racism and violence that we have witnessed is in stark contrast to the values of equality and respect that this Executive and Assembly strives to promote and uphold. And that was reaffirmed earlier today whenever our four-party executive met. We see the devastating impact that these crimes have on victims. We've spoken to them, you all know them, they're your friends, they're your family, they're your community. We can see the devastation that's having, and our thoughts are with all of those people, but much more than that. They want to know that we have their back, that we're going to stand with them. Our healthcare workers are afraid to go to work. Our nurses are afraid to come home. Our mothers and families are afraid to take their children to a summer scheme. They're afraid to take their children to the park. Our young people are afraid to walk the streets. And that was the message that we heard loud and clear. And you're hearing that too from the people that you're engaging with. Certainly yesterday, whenever the Deputy First Minister and I met with the Racial Equality Subgroup, we heard that message. We met with business leaders business owners that were impacted yesterday evening, and we heard about their devastation and the support that they need. But make no mistake about it. Last week's activity, the activity this week, I called activity, the criminality that we have witnessed over the course of recent days was nothing more than raw racism, and it has to be addressed with a zero-tolerance approach. Officials from the Executive Office are engaging with colleagues across government departments, with Belfast Council, with agencies, with groups on the ground, to explore how financial support can be provided to businesses damaged or impacted by the protests. The Executive will continue to implement the Racial Equality Strategy 2015 to 25, but also, as other members have indicated, we need to work towards moving to the next stage of that. And we acknowledge the work that's been done right across, and the contribution from right across our minority ethnic community, not just to our economic life, but to our public and political and social and cultural life too. This is our community. Never lose sight of that. This is our community that we're talking about. We want to see all of our local businesses grow, not to be destroyed by acts of violence. And as the strategy itself acknowledged, we're under no illusion about the size of challenges that we have in terms of tackling racism and inequality, and that it will require time and effort and resources to be put in that direction. Additionally, it also recognises that each and every one of us has a responsibility to play our part in combating racism and racial inequalities by embracing the diversity that undoubtedly contributes to building a more vibrant and a more shared and a more equal society. Full implementation requires the support of everybody out there, all of us and all partners. So I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge all of the work that's been done by the voluntary and community organisations out there who work to combat racism, not just in weeks like this, at these horrendous times, but all year round, day in and day out. We commend your tireless efforts. The Minority Ethnic Development Fund is an example of the Executive's programme that supports the invaluable work of these organisations. And one of our key aims has been to establish dedicated structures to ensure racial equality is given a continued focus and that there is a strong link with our minority ethnic population. Under the Racial Equality Strategy, the subgroup was established to function as that strong voice within government, here on issues specifically affecting minority ethnic people, migrants and race relations. And that subgroup has a significant role to play in terms of supporting the delivery of the current priorities, but also, crucially, for steering where we go in the future and developing those future priorities. And we need to provide the best possible, I think the Chair of the Committee mentioned this, we need to provide the best possible legal protection that we can to highlight or to stand against racism and to highlight that was one of the key actions of the strategy itself. We have now completed that work in terms of the public consultation. That's now being completed, and the resulting report that was published this week will inform the basis of now how we move forward, what the next legislative change looks like, and it moves us a step forward and a step closer towards a more equal and safe society. And while it will remain a key priority to deliver fully the current racial equality strategy, it's so important that we get the post-2025 strategy right. So that's why I concur with the motion itself today in terms of bringing that forward as quickly as we possibly can. But the Executive also recognises the need to work collaboratively. including with that racial equality subgroup, with thematic groups, with the wider minority ethnic community out there and sector, to ensure that we have inclusive processes, that the conversations are had and we develop these things for how we move forward together. Officials are already engaging in anticipation of the expiration of the current strategy, and in addition to our racial equality strategy, the T-Book strategy represents our commitment to building a truly shared and united society, regardless of people's political, religious or ethnic backgrounds. And as recent events have highlighted, much more work needs to be done. And we're also very conscious of the fact that the fabric of society has changed since the launch of the T-Book strategy way back then. And on that basis, we've asked our officials to conduct a review of the strategy, including how to ensure that it meets the needs of our current society, the makeup of our society today, and it ensures that it's a truly inclusive strategy for everybody that calls this place their home, because that will be the success in it. I want to acknowledge the work of the PSNI and other bodies, as I said, during the current unrest, and to reaffirm our commitment to working together to deliver a shared, peaceful and inclusive society. And we're also acutely aware, as the Justice Minister mentioned, in terms of the resources issue. All of our public services have been decimated by 14 years of Tory austerity, and we are fighting back against that. And we want this new Labour government to turn the tide in terms of the austerity agenda that we've had for the last 14 years. We need properly funded public services. We had the Chief Constable at the executive meeting this morning. We talked about the current situation as it's unfolding. We talked about the shared priority to tackle racism, to push back against racism, to have a zero-tolerance approach to intimidation and violence, and to push it back. And we will continue to work with the PSNI in terms of trying to achieve a better funding model for the police service, for our health system, for our education system and for all of our public services. People who have been displaced represent some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And we all have a responsibility to challenge prejudice and intimidation wherever we may see it. People seeking protection make significant contributions to our society, and we should value that. And I certainly value that. We value that. They bring with them a rich diversity of culture, along with new ideas and new approaches, and diversity is always going to be that strength. The publication of a refugee integration strategy, therefore, remains a priority for us, to establish a clear framework through which we can collectively and successfully support two-way integration. And all of that work is best delivered through effective and properly resourced public services. And as I said, we're acutely aware of the underfunding situation when it comes to our public services, and we're committed to doing all that we can. And our Finance Minister, Kiva Archibald, is making the case for that fair funding model to the Treasury and will continue to do so. We will, of course, continue all of our efforts right across government and a wider society to tackle racism and inequality in all of its forms, which has been brought into sharp focus over the course of recent days. All of us here in this chamber, and people are looking to us for that political leadership, and I know that the people here want to provide that leadership, but we have to speak out and we have to confront hate. We must challenge the lies that fuel this type of activity. We have to challenge that and make it abundantly clear that there is no tolerance for racism, for hate, for discrimination, for intimidation, for violence, for criminality. I've covered some of the policy issues here this afternoon that the motion referred to. I could go into a lot more detail, but for me today is about sending that very strong message. It's about clarity of message coming from this elected body. It's about us sending that very strong message, in an unequivocal way, that we reject racism, that we send that message to you all today. So I started by speaking to those who are involved in criminal activity and violence and intimidation. So let me finish by speaking to those people that have been from an ethnic minority background who've been impacted by the events of recent days, and not just these recent days. This is something that's an underbelly in our society that we need to tackle. We say to you, your political leaders say no to racism. We say to you, your political leaders say no to intolerance, no to hate. We say to you, yes to an inclusive society. We say to you, yes to diversity. We say to you, you are our brothers and you are our sisters. We say to you, you are our community. And we say to you, we are one community. And I am determined to do everything that I can, and working with every single person elected to this chamber, to do all that we can to build that better society, that we choose hope over fear, and that we ensure that every child here has the best opportunity they have to flourish. And we say no to this malevolent, violent activity. We say no to racism. Let that be the only message that flows from this chamber today.
John Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me be crystal clear. I utterly condemn the violence that has taken place on our streets and across the United Kingdom. No ifs, no buts. I want to express my sympathy for the families of Elsie, aged 7, Alice, aged 9, and Bibi, aged 6, who were so callously murdered in Southport. The violent scenes across the United Kingdom in the aftermath of these horrendous murders do nothing to honour their memory. Such actions are illegal, reckless, and counterproductive to the vital discussions we need to have about our country's immigration policies. There can be no doubt that the UK's long-term, uncontrolled immigration policy has sparked considerable concerns across this nation. Many citizens, myself included, feel that it is contributing to the considerable strain on our public resources. Ignoring these concerns is a huge disservice to the very people we claim to represent, regardless of background. These issues deserve proper scrutiny, political debate, and policy changes. But never, and I repeat, never, should they result in racist street attacks, whether that be in East, West, South Belfast, or across the United Kingdom. No. It is essential, therefore, to differentiate between opposing uncontrolled and illegal immigration and opposing immigration altogether. Most people support legal, controlled, and managed immigration. Our country has a proud history of welcoming those who seek a better life, who contribute positively to our society, who respect our laws and values. They are vital to sectors such as healthcare, as has been mentioned, where we rely heavily on the skilled professionals from abroad to maintain the quality of our services. Immigration, tailored to our country's specific needs, is both beneficial and necessary. Conversely, large-scale, uncontrolled immigration over a prolonged period of time is causing serious issues for local constituents. And I would be feeling them as an elected representative if I was not prepared to speak about them in this very place. I will in a moment. The additional strain, and I emphasise the word additional, strain on public services such as housing, school places, and council services cannot be ignored. I see this day in, day out as an elected representative. My first duty is to ensure our citizens' security, well-being, and prosperity. One of the most dangerous aspects of the current debate is the tendency for commentators and politicians to brand anyone who questions uncontrolled immigration and its contributing impact on society as far-right and racist. Members, the mother who has concerns about getting her child a school place is not far-right nor racist. The 25-year-old who cannot get housing in his local community is not far-right or racist. The elderly citizen who is angered that their winter fuel payment has been taken from them whilst £80 million a day is being spent to house asylum seekers inside hotels is not racist nor far-right, members. To label them as such is a mischaracterisation and stifles the constructive dialogue and alienates a large section of the population who have legitimate concerns. The current Westminster policy...
Would the member agree with me that the current Westminster government has much to do to develop policies to make a difference in this area?
I thank the member.
Members next.
It's an absolute critical point, because the current Westminster policy failures in relation to immigration have led to a situation where many people feel that their voice is not heard, nor their communities protected. Now, I understand I may speak from a different point of view than many members in this chamber, but it is better for me to say it in this place than people outside of this place to express it in a violent way which is unacceptable. We must channel this energy into meaningful dialogue and actions to address the underlying policy failures, whether that be weak border controls, underinvestment in key public services, low police numbers, and a UK-wide benefit system that continues to attract illegal immigration to the United Kingdom. We need a targeted immigration policy that deals with societal realities, grows our economy, and crucially enriches our country by representing and respecting its cultural identity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Kate Nicholl to wind on the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to thank members of the Muslim community for their presence here today, for their resilience and for their dignity. Some of what you have had to hear this afternoon will not have been easy. I want to acknowledge the fear that they and those from minority ethnic communities are living through. That should be our focus. And you have been let down, and collectively we need to do better. What has unfolded over the past few days has been shocking, unsettling, and very sad. It is hard to make sense of it. How did we get here? Was it 14 years of a Tory government and their hostile environment? Was it the newspaper headlines demonising the most vulnerable and platforming hostility as though it were a legitimate viewpoint? We know that there are dark forces at play on social media. How much of this was them? What impact has our failure to progress key pieces of legislation had? Our stop-start government, our financial instability? Is political hesitancy and at times silence in the face of hate crime to blame? Anna Lowe always said sectarianism and racism are two sides of the same coin. Has our inability to meaningfully tackle sectarianism, to have normalised suspicion and dislike of the other, been a driving force? My view is that all of this is true, wound together and set against a context of misinformation, disinformation, and inequality, and here we find ourselves, a complex path that has led us to a dark and frightening place. Thankfully, there are ways out of here, but we will need to grow together. As a first step, we must agree that the violence on our streets is unacceptable. We wholeheartedly condemn it, and those responsible must feel the full weight of the law, and members have been in agreement on this. Secondly, we need to name the problem. Those businesses that were attacked were owned by Muslims. The end point of the riots were the Belfast Islamic Centre. There is no ambiguity here. This was powered by racism and Islamophobia, and this motion states that. We need to focus on how we listen to the voices of those who have been impacted. Not one of us who has spoken here today has their lived experience. Those in fear need to be safe, and they need to be protected, and we must be visible to them and guided by their needs. The path from here gets harder. Tackling inequality is not easy. We have an insufficient budget and crises everywhere you look. Housing, poverty, health, education all need to be fixed. We need a properly resourced justice budget. There is legislation that is not far from completion on racial equality, refugee integration, anti-poverty. But the good news is the Assembly is up and running. We have ministers in place. We can get on with it, and we must. I feel very uncomfortable with the insistence of some to begin remarks by stating there are legitimate concerns. And I would like to read what the Victims Commissioner said. So-called legitimate concerns are never acknowledged when we have condemned examples of sectarian, hate crime, sexual assault or street violence in the past. It should therefore play no part in our messaging when we condemn violence against victims who are non-white. Hear, hear. I want to get on, but then I'll bring you in. There is a right to peaceful protest, and there are people who have concerns. These are, of course, true. However, there is no right to incitement. And while it may not be their intention, the result in qualifying your condemnation is to make those who feel those targeted feel that politicians are prioritising the perpetrators over the victim. Legitimate concerns do not validate illegitimate protest. Protest outside today bears no equivalence to the one on Saturday. And I acknowledge that while the intent of the riots was rooted in racism, not all who attended were racist. And there are too many in our society from every walk of life who are struggling. This is the issue. not immigration, not housing, and it is shameful to focus on that when there are victims sitting in this gallery who are living in fear right now, and we make it about housing policy. Housing policy is a failure of politicians, not of people who have a different religion or skin colour. Decades of deliberate misinformation will be hard to untangle. Across the world, there is a rise in anti-immigrant sentiment. Those with nothing, pitted against each other by those with everything. And here is where our leadership really matters. Here is where we have to be saying, this is misinformation. We have a moral duty to address the lies that people are being told, the manipulation, to stress that only 0.6% of the UK population are asylum seekers. 85% of refugees are in developing countries. We need to be clear that Northern Ireland needs newcomers to grow. And please, can we stay away from the good versus bad migrant narrative? Just because you work in a hospital does not make you better than an asylum seeker. We are all human beings. We all have worth. We all have value. Our diversity does make us richer. And we need to tap into the warmth and the empathy that our people possess in volume. That empathy and compassion that is sometimes hard to access because of poverty, because of failure for our public services to meet their needs. But these are two separate conversations. We are here about racist crime, Islamophobia. We will have another conversation about housing. Please do not conflate them. It is negligent to do so. It's dangerous to do so. Our views on politics and history and economics and the constitutional question will vary. But I really hope that today one thing we can agree on is that we are all united in our desire to make this place a better one, where everyone, regardless of their religion, their race, can feel safe, can be happy, and can lead a good life. I want to finish, Mr. Speaker, by reading the words of Mohammed Atif, who is in the gallery. He's from the Belfast Multicultural Association, and he spoke to us on the stairs outside, and I think it's right that we end with his words. He says, "We must reflect on the message we are sending to our children. What kind of society do we want them to inherit? Is it one where division and intolerance thrive, or one that celebrates diversity and unity? We have witnessed failures from authorities and politicians in adequately protecting Muslim and immigrant communities, and now they have the opportunity to correct this. It is imperative that today you send a resounding message of solidarity, that we stand united against racism, Islamophobia, and discrimination in all forms. We urge every citizen of Northern Ireland to embrace our diversity and recognise it as a strength. Together, let us build a future where everyone, regardless of their background, skin colour, and religious beliefs, feels valued and safe. The time is now to affirm our commitment to inclusivity, making Northern Ireland a welcoming home for all." And he asks, will you promise me this? Will you promise this to yourself? Will you promise this to our next generations? Thank you.
The question is that the amendment standing in the name of Brian Kingston and Jonathan Buckley be made. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Clear the lobbies. The question will be put in 3 minutes. Order. Members will resume their seats. Order. Question is that the amendment standing in the name of Brian Kingston and Jonathan Buckley be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. Do we have tellers? Order. Order. Tellers have been appointed at Swallows. Tellers for the ayes are Tom Buchanan and Brian Kingston. Teller for the noes, Andrew McMurray and David Honeyford. Clear the lobbies. The assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left.